George Washington is earning his own money and buying his own land by age 17. The whole point of the West was to gain ownership of land but keep it. And in 10 or 20 years, as the American population grew, that land would become more valuable. To your right. Come on, guys. And this was the basis for more fortunes in American history than any other way of making money. If you had land, even if you were an ordinary person, if you had plots of land, you could grow your own food. You had what would be called independence. So for Washington, having a lot of land was important. But his goals are about to be stopped. In 1763, a new royal proclamation creates a direct threat to Washington's investments. To avoid another expensive war on the frontier, King George III bans colonists from buying or settling land in the West. Pages rustle. What it does, basically, is draw a boundary along the top of the Appalachian Mountains. Everything west of the Appalachians is Indian land, and that land is not allowed for British subjects. This upset the plans of Washington and every other American who was thinking of the West as, by this time, almost an American right. He owns about 60,000 acres of land that he got through service for the British in the French and Indian War. But in principle, it says that all the land you have out there is worthless. Sates. So after his dream to become a great military man was blocked by British prejudice against the colonials, the rules seemed to show that the British looked at Americans as second-class subjects. So if the British Empire is not good for you in the military, and it is not good for you economically, what else is there? This proclamation begins a decade of restrictions on the colonists' dreams. It is followed by many new taxes. Taxes that will help Britain pay off its debt from the French and Indian War. Drums beating. Boston was at the center of opposition to British law, starting with the Stamp Act. Everything that is paper, money, newspapers, all being taxed. This was a new kind of tax on goods that were in the colonies instead of things that were being imported. That change worried Americans. Chanting, "No more taxes! No more taxes!" The colonists started boycotts where they would not use British goods. The colonists are sending petitions. Troops are sent to Boston. Aren't die de twint, and on die de satriskirkidrds yelling, "Will the Americans start fighting over this?" Shouting indistinctly, "Gunfire!" The Boston Massacre. Yelling, "Gunfire!" Knives stabbing. American colonists killed by British gunfire. Then we have events like the Boston Tea Party, which is a protest against a tax on tea. And then the intolerable acts. Punishment for the Boston Tea Party. Hit America like the strike of a hammer. Dersen 5.29 Sachi. Crowd shouting indistinctly. The British have taken away the charter of Massachusetts. They have closed the port of Boston. People in other colonies are watching very closely. What is happening there? And they are thinking, that could happen here. The cause of Boston now becomes the cause of all America. And that is when we see George Washington become a reluctant revolutionary. Washington considered himself to be British. He wanted to be part of that imperial world. But when that broke apart, it was the kind of thing where you could only hate something that you once loved very much. You could argue that the British Empire slowly built the man who would destroy it from the inside out. Washington believes that the British Empire plans to enslave the American people. He sees a planned plot in the sense that they no longer have control over their own domestic policy. The delegates are divided on how to move forward. While some want to keep sending petitions to Parliament, others are pushing for stronger action. The colonists are demanding their rights, and at first, trying to use the system that already exists to get their rights. Sending petitions, traditional protests. doing the things you do as a colonist to express your needs and your demands. Finally, the Congress agrees to an all-colony boycott of British goods, a move meant to pressure Britain to remove their taxes and take their troops out of Boston. Even though the word revolution is still not spoken publicly, Washington is not convinced it can be avoided. Gunfire. The following spring, Washington's fears come true at Lexington and Concord. Lexington and Concord shocked Americans. It truly stunned them. What does it mean if your own government is now shooting at you? Until this point, most colonists were willing to say, if you could just turn back the clock, then everything would be fine. All these people, including Washington, reached a moment when they thought, you know, we simply cannot remain part of the British Empire. We cannot do it. By the time the Second Continental Congress meets 3 weeks later, the time has come to put down the pen and pick up the sword. The question is, who will lead the fight? We need a military leader to take control of events and truly become a commander of some kind of army, whatever that army is going to be. And they need someone who will be reliable politically, someone who will not try to become a military dictator, but someone who has the basic skills and knowledge to lead an army. It is a very short list of men in North America who meet both of those requirements. One of the most experienced is Horatio Gates, a British-born veteran who served on the frontier, married an American, and decided to stay. He has held the King's Commission. He has been a commissioned officer. He has seen battle, perhaps even more than Washington has. But Gates was not from Virginia, and many people, including John Adams, understood that Virginia, which was the largest colony at the time, needed to be involved in the war effort, and the best way to involve Virginia was to place a Virginian at the very top. It was important to Washington to be able to tell himself that he was not ambitious. It was important for him to be able to say, I am not campaigning for this job. That complicated mix of public image and balancing private ambition with the greater good was something Washington did as well as any American ever did. I mean, there were not many people with the kind of respect that he had. If not him, who? Yodidu, Washington, one of Virginia's delegates to the Second Continental Congress, arrives wearing a military uniform. It reminds people that he has military experience. If you need a commander, look no further. He will have to build this army in effect from himself down by appearing to be a confident man even when almost no one else has confidence in the cause. Washington fell in love with the country that was being created, and he was ready to fight for it and die for it. He strongly believes in the cause. He believes that as a virtuous man, he must place all his skills, all his abilities, all his resources in service of his countrymen. But he knows that whoever leads this army is more likely than not to lose his life, to lose his fortune, and to lose his reputation. This is not a position of glory. Washington always defined greatness as the willingness to do things not for yourself but for others, and so every part of his being said he must do this. Then, after losing New York City to the British, George Washington and the Continental Army are running for safety. I am almost tired to death from the backward movement of things. It is impossible to manage matters in a way that pleases public. Expectations. After the New York campaign, Washington fell into a deep depression. He felt very insecure that this plan would work and that he would be able to win. Water, sir? Sir? No, Billy. Horse whinnies. Sir. Washington basically said, I would quit if I could, but people say there is no one to take my place. So we know Washington was at his lowest point. By December, Washington's army is only weeks away from total collapse. At midnight on January 1st, Enlistments for almost all of his about 6,000 remaining soldiers will end. Washington believes General Howe is waiting until then to make his move. We have been pushed through New Jersey. General Howe is now on the other side of the Delaware, and without question, plans, if possible, to take control of Philadelphia. You know the terrible consequences that would come from losing it. As the British begin moving in December 1776 toward the Delaware River, he knows he will need to find some way to convince these few thousand troops he still has to remain in the field. But words alone will not be enough to make that happen. It is quite amazing how he just kept going, and he was very good at figuring out, after early defeats, what would create the most positive result. If we can do something that is very visible and very symbolic, we might change the mood of the people and we might see young men returning to our ranks. But time is short. Just X miles from Washington's Bucks County headquarters, Trenton, New Jersey, is now General Howe's southernmost outpost, a garrison guarded by about 15,000 Hessian mercenaries. The Hessians were professional soldiers from Germany that the British government hired to strengthen their army. They were professionals. They were some of the most feared warriors on earth. Washington prepares a bold attack plan, a nighttime crossing of the Delaware River. The army will move in 3 groups, one as a distraction, another to block the enemy's escape route, and finally, a third, under Washington's command, to march on Trenton. Did they get the map? Some of the generals. He was not ready to give up the cause at that point. It might have been the logical thing to do, but history is often made by people making bold decisions during dangerous and difficult moments.